Good afternoon. I invite you, before we get started, to turn off or silence all of your cell phones or other devices so that they don't disrupt the service. We have emergency exits in the back and out the sides, restrooms down there if you need them, and tissues as well. I'm Rabbi Karen Gorbin of Temple Beth, and it is my sad honor to be here as we lay Natalie Mayer to her final resting place, honor her memory, and share stories of her life and vibrancy. I think she would be very disappointed by this room being quite as quiet as it is. Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex, too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. We remember Natalie, and we join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to her family. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with a recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Natalie's life with the millennia-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Psalm 23. Adonai ro'i lo echzar binot she'ar bitzeni almei menuchot yenaleni nafshi God as my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, restores my soul, guides me in straight paths for the sake of God's name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Kohelet Ecclesiastes wrote, "The eye never has its fill of seeing." Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world, never complete their task, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearned for yet another respite from the final summons, and how we yearn to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God, be with those whose hearts are broken, because whenever parting comes, it comes too soon, and this was way too soon. Console them at this moment. Be near to them when light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of healing. Yet another precious moment together. We share words of memories, words of celebration of Natalie's life, and I'd like to invite up to start Rabbi Bruce Cadden, Emeritus Rabbi of Temple Bethel, to share some words. We share words of memories, words of celebration of Natalie's life, and I'd like to invite up to start Rabbi Bruce Cadden, Emeritus Rabbi of Temple Beth.
Natalie Mayer was a force to be reckoned with. That was true in every aspect of her life, but especially in her relationship with Pacific Lutheran University. That became the passion in her life, giving her a sense of purpose and accomplishment, turning her love for others into a lasting legacy that touched the faculty, staff, students in our entire community. In speaking with other faculty members, staff, and former students, the words that kept coming up were dynamic, engaging, fun, passionate, and generous. She was not just generous with her money, creating the Natalie Mayer Holocaust and Genocide Studies Visiting Scholar Endowment, and supporting many other programs at PLU, but she was also generous with her time and her talents. Natalie, along with her brother Joe, played an important role in convincing their father, Kurt, to make a significant donation to create the chair at PLU. With her own generous gift and her power of persuasion that her father could not refuse. Indeed, Natalie immersed herself in the Holocaust and Genocide Studies program at PLU. Although she had not been inside a formal classroom for many years, she enrolled in a course taught by Rana Kaufman and Kirsten Christensen. As Rana recalled a few years ago when she introduced Natalie, it was a remarkable moment. Kurt Mayer's daughter taking the first ever Introduction to Holocaust and Genocide Studies course at PLU, and Natalie sat in the front row, perhaps aware of the research that the most successful students sit at the front of the class. Natalie sat next to a young woman from Cambodia named Marina Fall, the granddaughter of survivors of the Khmer Rouge. There they sat in the front, the daughter and granddaughter of survivors, and also smart, brave women in their own rights. Kirsten remembers that Natalie asked good questions and believed in finding answers collectively. She believed in learning and change in her own and in young people's ability to confront the most vexing problems of history and of our day, and to find ways to address them. Kirsten had the brilliant idea of leading a J-term study away program in Germany, as she'd previously done, but with one significant difference. The group read Kurt Mayer's memoir and retraced his journey from mines, along with Pam, Natalie, and Natalie's son, Elliot. Kirsten reflected about this trip. At each stop, we read from Kurt's memoir, connecting his early life to our surroundings. Natalie's emotions flowed freely during that trip, and she spoke often of her deep desire to preserve the memories and sacrifices of her dad and family. These experiences left lasting impressions on Rana and Kirsten and marked the beginning of lasting friendships. Natalie not only made a strong, lasting impression on her instructors, but on her fellow students as well. Two of those students, Sophia Marr and Lexi Jason, shared their reflections on this life-changing trip. They noted that reading passages from his book, they drew connections to how Kurt's family braced for the persecution of Jewish people across the region. They traced the instances of flight as Kurt and his parents moved from Mainz to nearby Wiesbaden. They experienced the separation as they learned how Kurt, as a Jewish child, was forbidden to attend public school and was sent to a Jewish boarding school, while Kurt's father was hidden in an unheated cellar with a dirt floor. And the trauma as they read Kurt's account of he and his schoolmates witnessing the burning of their prayer books and Torah on their school grounds during Kristallnacht. Rereading these passages of Kurt's memoir at the sites of their occurrence with his dear family members present lent itself to a whole new dimension of remembrance and connection. This trip and Natalie's role in connecting the students to Kurt were transformative for both Sophia and Lexi, who work for two Jewish organizations in Seattle. They recognize that it is not only reading about the Holocaust that is significant, but experiencing the places and events, particularly with those whose families were shaped by it. Natalie also recognized that we needed to teach students about other genocides as well. The last couple of years, she wanted to invite a speaker for the spring lecture who would focus on the Native American genocide. And Natalie didn't just leave it to Beth Greek Pallel, the Kurt Mayer Chair, to choose the speaker. She would look at YouTube videos and explore on her own to suggest possible speakers. In the words of Laura Lee Hagan of PLU's Office of Advancement, she was all in. On a personal note, Natalie was always caring and supportive during my tenure at Temple Beth. She also had a close connection with my first wife, Barbara, of blessed memory. Maybe it was the curly hair or the irreverent sense of humor they both had, but I know that Barbara appreciated finding a kindred soul. In his memoir, My Personal Brush with History, Kurt wrote, "In many respects, Natalie and I are very similar in that we both have strong personalities and are not afraid to say what we think. Having two people like this in the same family is not always easy, but it is never boring. Having Natalie in our lives was never boring. We experienced the presence of a special soul who was full of life and full of love. May the memory of Natalie Mayer be for a blessing."
I'd like to invite up Joe, Natalie's brother.
For most of my life, I described my sister to others by saying things like, if you've ever met Natalie, regardless of what you think, you will never forget her. She was a definition of a strong presence, a larger-than-life personality, a force of nature. When she walked into the room, everyone knew who she was. She said what she felt, and often with no filter. Whenever there are two siblings who are very different from each other, and Natalie and I were in some ways polar opposites, they often spend too much time worried about what the other one is doing or saying. That was my problem, kind of always closing my eyes in disbelief whenever Natalie charged into her room and told everyone what she thought. I vacillated between admiring her and admittedly some embarrassment. And I say this because when we were together with other people around and she was being her typical self, she would often say, "I know I'm embarrassing my brother right now. Ha ha." Natalie was a child of the 70s who grew up and surrounded herself with rebellious kids who were kind of wild. She gave my parents a hard time, but she always came out okay on the other side. There were so many hilarious stories from her young adult years, like the time at age 18 that she ran a stop sign in my mother's car and plowed head-on into a police car. This was before cell phones, and she ran to a payphone to call her friend to ask what to do because she was too afraid to call our parents. But she accidentally dialed our home number. When my mom picked up the phone, Natalie screamed and hung up. That didn't go over very well. That was life in our house. Lots of drama and excitement. At 24, Natalie decided she wanted to be a hairstylist and attended the Vidal Sassoon School in London, which allowed her to have a successful career in that profession for many years. Natalie, though, becoming a hairdresser turned out to be a little bit difficult for me at times because hairdressers tend to hear all the gossip that is going on all over town. So once while I was in high school and my parents had made the terrible mistake of leaving me home alone while they traveled to Europe, I decided to have a party. It wasn't long before my sister knew more about what was going to happen than I did. Later, Natalie spent time learning the property management business and working as an apartment manager to better understand how our family business worked. She reviewed expenses and kept tabs on properties. One summer, I came home from college and my father convinced Natalie and I that we should both take a real estate course, like to get a license. Even though we weren't planning to sell real estate, he thought it was good knowledge to have and a relatively quick and easy course to take on a summer home. Since I was the student in the family and Natalie had struggled with school, she dove into the work and studied every night. I wasn't super worried about it and assumed I would easily pass. And pretty soon it was the night before the exam, and I had to read most of the book and cram as much information as I could. You needed 70% to pass. Natalie came through with flying colors. I got 69%. For the next 30 years, she reminded me of how that test worked out. In 1991, Natalie married Don Yeager, and they were together for 20 years while also raising Elliot. Their marriage had its ups and downs, and eventually they split up, but it was more about them growing apart than something bad happening, and they remained friends after their divorce. The biggest part of their life was raising Elliot together, and I don't think Elliot would mind me saying that he wasn't always the easiest kid to raise. If you were to name Natalie's primary accomplishments in life, being a committed mother to Elliot was at the top of the list. And I will always remember some of the things she did for my kids when they needed support the most from someone other than their parents. Many years after their divorce, Dawn developed Lewy body dementia and very quickly declined. He didn't have any other family other than Elliot. No parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, or cousins. There's nothing worse than going into decline, losing your mind, and not having someone to look after you. Elliot did what he could, but it was more than he could handle. Natalie called me over to look at Don's house, and she said, "We need to make sure that he is okay." She orchestrated the sale of his home, moved him to an assisted living facility where he would be safe, and managed his financial resources so he would have enough to be okay until he finally passed a few years later. I have never seen anyone do so much for an ex? She put in hundreds of hours for Don, being his financial caretaker, the point of contact for his caregivers. What she did for Don during that time will always be one of those things I will remember and admire her for. Over the past 15 to 20 years, Natalie found her final passion in life, committing herself to nonprofit work. She served on boards, she raised lots of money for nonprofits, and she did a great job of doing what all board members should do, be a cheerleader for their organization. She partnered with Nancy Powell and spent hundreds of hours promoting Holocaust studies at PLU, the Holocaust Center in Seattle, and Yad Vashem. She joined the Pierce College Foundation Board and became a big advocate for Pierce. She joined the Northwest Sinfonietta Board, too. My sister was a big fan of 70s music, Saturday Night Fever, Motown, and even some hard rock. It actually influenced my musical taste a lot. My father couldn't stand any of it. He was a big classical music fan, and I think Natalie learned to appreciate classical music as she got older in honor of him, and she eventually got involved with the Sinfonietta, and before long, she was chairing their board. I was just astounded that she was doing this because I couldn't see her in that role. But this was another example of Natalie's evolution as a person. Like other times, I had truly underestimated her. I also want to say that she was very committed to animals and organizations that helped animals. Kindred Souls Foundation, Humane Society, Northwest Track, Point Defiance. She owned many dogs over the years, a bunny, a parrot, a cockatiel. I used to say to her, "You're a slave to your pets. You can't leave town without these animals." But she loved them, and she gave her, and they gave her the unconditional love that she craved. And her animals loved her, and she loved them. I especially want to thank Natalie's caregivers these past several weeks and months. She had an incredible group of committed women who loved her and gave everything they could to her. Lisa, Kathleen, Paulina, Joanna, and Rosemary. You gals were amazing. Thank you. On Saturday night, as my sister was failing, and we all knew the end was near, I found these 5 women all at her house, leaning over my sister, tears streaming down their faces, giving her hugs and words of love. I looked at them and I said, I feel like I'm in a scene from Steel Magnolias. Our relationship as brother and sister was an interesting ride. Through 55 years of growing up together, learning from each other, sometimes competing with each other a little, but always in the end knowing that if something bad happened, we could count on each other. She was a really unique person, someone you never forget, and someone who I know will always be cheering me on, even if I'm the only one who can hear her voice.
I'd like to invite up Elliot, Natalie's son.
Hello. My mother was the guiding light in my life. As a mother, she was the only one qualified to be mine. No one could fill those shoes. She was the very definition of a warrior in many ways, and not just in her current, most recent personal battles. She would protect me and our family with the fierceness and love of a mama grizzly bear. She was always trying to better herself, and most of the time was also open to hearing criticisms of herself, even though she had very, very little negative sides. And one word to say, if I had to choose any word, it would be driven. That would be her most important adjective. I will miss that beautiful room lighting up smile of hers and that personality that never, ever pushed anyone away. I will also miss all those movies that we watched and those beautiful trips that we went all over the world with, including Mexico for 20 plus times, one for every year of my life, and Germany, Paris, and a bunch of other lovely places. And this world is going to miss her forever. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to invite up Nancy Powell. Do you want Paul to come with you? Okay, and Paul Kirshner.
Natalie and I were soul sisters. She referred to us as sisters by choice. I believe we were destined to meet. The word in Judaism is beshert. We first met on a trip to hear PLU professor Bob Erickson speak at the Washington, D.C. Holocaust Memorial Museum. We stayed at a hotel together and spent all night talking until the sun came up. We laughed so hard, our sides ached. We had so much in common. Our fathers were real estate developers. They were driven, and they had high expectations for us. We shared our therapy experiences about our families. We bared our souls. That started our amazing 20-year relationship. We dreamed of working on Holocaust education at PLU together and raising money for the program. Natalie would say, "I can't speak in front of people, certainly not to raise money." I told Natalie, "Yes, you can, and you will with my help. We can do this together." Natalie learned very quickly, and she and Joe helped raise most of the money for the Kurt Mayer Endowed Chair of Holocaust Studies at PLU. Natalie took flight after that. She became an amazing natural speaker, advocating for all her causes, Northwest Sinfonietta, Kindred Souls, Pierce College, PLU, Temple Beth, and many more. We supported each other in all our endeavors. We read each other's speeches. We worked together yearly to develop the PAL Holocaust Conference. Natalie was driven by education. She took classes at PLU, traveled to Germany with students, and she loved every minute. She thrived. We both wanted to make an impact on the world through education, and Natalie had a vision which came true. As was said, she created an endowment for Holocaust Genocide lecture series at PLU. We enjoyed traveling together and had an amazing adventure to Poland just as COVID started. I was to speak at a Forum of Dialogue conference in Warsaw, and Natalie enthusiastically joined me. Natalie said, "The food will be terrible in Poland." I knew the food would be great because I had been there before. Food, as you know, is very important to Natalie. She always had a secret stash of goodies when we traveled. We wandered through the streets of Krakow and by chance found a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Natalie was in heaven. The food was delicious, and Natalie loved the chicken schnitzel and the chocolate sponge cake. We visited museums in Warsaw, but our trip was cut short by COVID as the Polish government was shutting down gatherings over 500 people. So the conference I was to speak at got canceled. They later filmed us in a hotel we were staying at for a later online presentation. I was very stressed, even panicking, as Natalie wanted to go to more museums. COVID was spreading in Warsaw. I said, "Natalie, we need to get out of Poland right now before it's too late." I only convinced her after talking to the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw. They said, "If I were you, I would leave." So we left the next morning on a flight to London and eventually returned to the United States safely, just as Trump was putting a deadline on when the US citizens could return. We were also a very adventurous duo. We loved to fish together in Alaska, catching salmon and halibut. We went to Talon Lodge in Sitka, and everyone loved Natalie for her wonderful spirit. She hated when the fish was killed, but she loved the challenge of catching those fish. Natalie was a foodie, except fish. She caught fish in Alaska and gave most of it away. She just loved the challenge, and so did I. Year after year, we returned to Talon Lodge, and we fished for many years together. Beshert. Natalie and I wanted to grow spiritually together with an open heart. Dr. Daphne Michaels came into my life through a friend, and I shared her name with Natalie. Natalie began seeing Daphne and began a journey of self-discovery until her final days. Natalie's love had no limits. She loved people and animals, all kinds, animals, bunnies, guinea pigs, and dogs. She had the biggest heart. We really loved each other with no judgment, just to support each other in life with all the ups and downs. We always looked forward to those times we laughed uncontrollably, either trying to bake challah together, which never worked, or baking cookies, which were always talking so much we forgot ingredients. We laughed and laughed like Laverne and Shirley, making those candies, looking forward to the next time. Okay. Okay. You want to do this? Yeah. Here.
Handoff here. I'm going to try not to fumble the rest of Nancy's speech here. So I'm continuing with Nancy's speech. I received a call from Joe Wednesday that Natalie was not doing well. Paul and I immediately got on a flight from Arizona. I told Natalie, I'm coming, open your arms, I want a big hug. I believe Natalie waited for me. We arrived at her home, and in the next 4 hours, we shared joy, sadness, humor, reminisced about our adventures, exchanged cherished bracelets and comfort. We shared hugs, we ate watermelon and chocolate strawberries while discussing life and death with one huge loving heart and souls of the best friendship. Natalie seemed to let go of the fight over those hours, and with courage, had the closure with her soul sister by choice. Love you, Natalie. Rest in peace.
We are at the darkest time of our year. The nights are long, the moon is starting to wane. The days have been cold, and today is especially dreary. It's at times like these when we seek out warmth and light and love. We gather with friends and family to celebrate the joy and blessings we have. We share gifts with each other. We fill our communities with festive lights. And next week, we will light candles to celebrate the Festival of Lights. Our tradition tells us that the candles on our Hanukkah menorahs remind us of the miracle that God performed for our ancestors millennia ago, when the Jews who cleared out the ransacked Holy of Holies could only find enough pure oil to light the lampstand for one day. Yet the oil lasted for 8 days until new oil could be refined. Each day brought uncertainty and the potential for despair, But the Jews hoped, and God's love and presence shone clearly as the lights burned on and on. For us, however, one of our candles of joy and light and love has gone out. Natalie's life, which shone so brightly for her 67 years, has come to an end. She and we did not get that miracle that we so desperately hoped for. Her absence will be deeply felt. But the blessing of candles is that their light can be passed on to others, both during their lifetimes and after they burn out. Though they themselves eventually flicker out and die, their spark can live on for eternity, as their essence is used to ignite other candles. Natalie's life may have come to an end, but part of her spark is in each of us. You've heard so many stories, most of which are the ones that were shared with me, and I'm sure that all of you have more stories to share during the meal of condolence and Shiva, both this afternoon and on Thursday evening. And there are more stories that we hold in each of us, more than can be shared with each other. Stories about her love of fun, about the cookies that she did actually bake successfully, and the yearly birthday cakes that she made for all of her family, about how she joined Ethan's cross-country road trip and persevered through years of cancer with unfailing hope. Each of you has a spark of Natalie inside you that you will carry for the rest of your lives. Those sparks are the core of her legacy, the part of her that remains even though she has died. Share them with each other, and share them with those she never met. It only takes one lit candle, one tiny bit of flame, to ignite other candles, to make the whole world shine. Make sure that the light of Natalie's life continues to spread through the darkness of this season and through the darkness of grief, and she will never be completely gone. The Israeli poet Chana Senech wrote, Yesh kochavim shora magia arza rak kasher hematzmam avdu ve'enam. There's stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with the people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. We remember Natalie, and we ask for her soul to be bound up in the bond of everlasting life as we offer the words of El Malei Rachamim. Please rise, embody your spirit as we offer this prayer. El Malei Rachamim, shochen bamromim, amtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, im kedoshim uteharim, kezohar harakia mazhirim, et nishmat Yochanan bat Baruch Ruth, shalcha leolama. Bal harachamim, yastireha beseter knafav leolamim, vitzror mitzror chayim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar Amen. God of abundant mercy, God Most High, may the soul of our loved one, Natalie Ann Mayer, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. You may be seated. for a moment. This does conclude our sanctuary service. There are two main mitzvot, two main commandments that we observe when we come to a funeral. The first is to honor the dead, which involves sharing these words of memory and love, and also includes accompanying our loved one to their final resting place. I know that the weather outside is not cooperating with us so well, so I encourage as many of you as feel comfortable to come out to the Home of Peace Cemetery to join us there. And if you would prefer to wait here until we come back for the meal of condolence, that leads us into the second part of the second mitzvah, the second commandment of what we are doing here today, which is to comfort our mourners. And that will take place during our meal of condolence this afternoon, and then Shiva on Thursday at 7 p.m., which will be back here. I'd like to invite you now once again to please rise in body or spirit as Natalie is brought to the funeral coach, and we accompany her to Home of Peace.